It was a quiet evening when Jennifer Hudson heard a knock at her front door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and when she finally opened the door, she found a young man standing there, nervous, exhausted, and clearly carrying something far heavier than the small envelope in his hand. He looked at her for several seconds without saying a word, as if he had spent his entire life preparing for this exact moment. Jennifer calmly asked him who he was and what he wanted. But instead of answering, the young man reached inside his jacket and pulled out an old, faded childhood photograph. He held it toward her with trembling hands. "I think you know this picture," he said quietly. Jennifer looked down at it, and for a moment, the confusion on her face seemed to disappear. The photograph showed a young woman with a small child, captured years earlier. And according to the young man, that picture was connected to a secret he had been trying to understand for most of his life. "My name is Marcus," he finally said, "and I came here because I believe you are my mother." Jennifer stared at him in disbelief. The words were so unexpected that neither of them spoke for several seconds. Marcus immediately explained that he wasn't there for fame, money, or publicity. He wasn't asking for anything from her. He simply wanted answers to questions that had followed him since childhood. After the death of the woman who raised him, Marcus had discovered an old box hidden among her belongings. Inside were photographs, handwritten letters, dates, and documents that seemed to connect his childhood to a chapter of Jennifer's past. At first, he convinced himself that it had to be a coincidence. After all, thousands of people could have photographs that somehow included a celebrity's name. But the more he investigated, the more unusual the clues became. One photograph carried Jennifer's name. Another document contained a date that seemed connected to the time Marcus was born. And then there was an old handwritten letter that made him wonder whether someone had deliberately kept the truth from him. For months, Marcus searched for explanations, comparing dates, studying old photographs, and trying to separate facts from assumptions. Every time he thought he had found an answer, another question appeared. Eventually, he realized there was only one person who could possibly help him understand the mystery. So he traveled to Jennifer's home, stood outside her door, and took the biggest risk of his life. Now, with the old photograph sitting between them, Jennifer had to decide whether to dismiss the young man's unbelievable claim or listen to the story he had carried with him for years. But Marcus had brought more than just a photograph. He had brought a letter, a name, and one final piece of evidence that he believed could change everything. And what Jennifer would discover next would turn a simple knock at the door into an emotional journey through forgotten memories, family secrets, and questions that had remained unanswered for decades. This is a fictional, dramatized story created for entertainment. Marcus stood quietly in Jennifer Hudson's living room, staring at the old photograph between them. A few minutes earlier, he had been a stranger standing outside her door, but now the atmosphere inside the house felt completely different. Jennifer picked up the photograph again and studied it carefully. She turned it over, examining the faded edges and the handwriting on the back. Marcus watched every movement, hoping her expression would suddenly reveal something he couldn't see for himself. Instead, Jennifer looked confused. "Where exactly did you get this?" she asked. Marcus took a slow breath. "It belonged to the woman who raised me," he replied. "She passed away a few months ago. While I was going through her things, I found a box hidden in the back of a closet. I almost threw it away because I thought it was just old family stuff. Then I saw your name." Jennifer looked at him again. "My name?" Marcus nodded. "Your name was written on the back of the photograph." For Marcus, the discovery had started as a small mystery, but it quickly became something he couldn't ignore. He had grown up knowing very little about his biological family. The woman who raised him, Elaine, had always told him that some parts of his childhood were complicated and that he would understand them when he was older. But every time Marcus asked about his biological mother, Elaine would become quiet. Sometimes she would change the subject. Sometimes she would simply tell him that the past was better left alone. Marcus had accepted those answers for years because he trusted her. But after she died, there was no one left to explain what she had hidden. The box became his only connection to a past he barely understood. Inside were several photographs, old letters, medical papers, and a small hospital bracelet with a date printed on it. Marcus remembered staring at that date for hours because it was close to the date he had always been told he was born. Jennifer placed the photograph on the table. "Marcus, a photograph doesn't prove that I'm your mother," she said carefully. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed that the situation had caught her completely off guard. "I know," Marcus replied. "I know it sounds unbelievable. Then why are you so convinced?" she asked. Marcus reached into his bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Because of this, he placed it beside the photograph. Jennifer slowly opened it. The paper was old and slightly yellow, with handwriting that had faded in several places. She began reading silently. Marcus watched her face. At first, nothing changed. Then her eyebrows tightened slightly. She stopped reading and looked up. "Where did you find this?" she asked. "In the same box. And you don't know who wrote it?" Marcus shook his head. "No, but there was a name mentioned in it. A name connected to you." Jennifer leaned back. She had no reason to accept Marcus's story as fact. She knew that old documents could be misunderstood, names could be written down for countless reasons, photographs could be taken at events where people barely knew each other, dates could overlap by coincidence. But something about Marcus's persistence made it impossible to simply dismiss him. He wasn't demanding anything. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't accusing her. He looked like someone who had spent months carrying a question that had become too heavy to carry alone. Marcus began explaining how the discovery had changed his life. After finding the box, he started researching everything he could. He searched through old photographs and public records. He compared dates and locations. He looked for connections between Elaine and people who had been around Jennifer during the same period. At first he found nothing. Then he discovered a name that appeared repeatedly in the old papers. It belonged to someone named Danielle, a woman Elaine had apparently known many years earlier. Marcus had never heard the name before, but one particular letter suggested Danielle knew something about his early childhood. He showed Jennifer another page. "This is where I started getting confused," he said. "There are references to a child. There are references to keeping someone safe. And there are dates that match the period when I was born." Jennifer read the page carefully. "It still doesn't establish what you're saying," she replied. Marcus nodded. "I know," looked down at his hands. "That's why I came here. I don't want to build my life around a guess." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jennifer asked the question Marcus had been hoping she would ask. "What did Elaine tell you about your biological mother?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Almost nothing." He explained that Elaine had raised him with love, but whenever he asked about his birth mother, she would say that the circumstances were complicated. Marcus had spent years assuming that Elaine simply didn't want to talk about the past. After her death, however, he realized that she hadn't been avoiding the subject because she had forgotten. She had been avoiding it because she knew something. Marcus remembered one particular conversation from when he was 16. He had asked Elaine why he didn't have any baby photographs. She had gone silent for several seconds before saying, "One day, you'll understand why I did what I did." At the time, Marcus had been angry. He thought she was refusing to give him a simple answer. Now, sitting across from Jennifer, those words sounded completely different. Jennifer looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and uncertainty. "You should know something," she said. "Finding someone's name in an old box doesn't automatically mean there's a hidden story." Marcus nodded. "I understand. And resemblance isn't proof either." "I understand that too." Jennifer paused. "So what exactly do you want from me?" Marcus looked directly at her. "The truth. Even if the truth hurts me." Those words changed the atmosphere in the room. Jennifer looked away for a moment. She understood what it meant to live under public attention, where every personal moment could become a headline and every rumor could take on a life of its own. She knew that a story involving family could become something much bigger than the people involved. But Marcus wasn't talking about headlines. He was talking about his identity. He was talking about the one question that had followed him from childhood into adulthood finally. Jennifer asked, "Would you be willing to take a DNA test?" Marcus didn't hesitate. Yes, his answer came so quickly that Jennifer almost seemed surprised. Marcus explained that he had already considered it. He hadn't come to her expecting her to simply believe him. He wanted something that could separate emotion from fact. The test was arranged privately. There were no cameras, no reporters, and no dramatic announcement. Just two people. The test was arranged privately. There were no cameras, no reporters, and no dramatic announcement. Just two people waiting for an answer. When the samples were collected, Marcus felt a strange combination of relief and fear. For months, he had imagined receiving a result that would completely change his life. But now that the test had been taken, he began wondering whether he was ready for either possibility. The waiting period became unbearable. Marcus found himself replaying the night he discovered the box. He remembered the dust in the storage room. He remembered opening the first envelope. He remembered seeing the photograph. He remembered the strange feeling that came over him when he saw Jennifer's name written on the back. He had spent so much time imagining what the truth might be that he had forgotten one important possibility. What if the truth was nothing like the story he had created? When the results finally arrived, Marcus returned to Jennifer's home. The envelope sat on the table between them. Neither touched it for several seconds. Marcus stared at it as though it contained the answer to his entire life. Jennifer finally said, "You should open it." Marcus shook his head. "I can't." "Why?" "Because I'm scared." Jennifer looked at him quietly. Marcus continued, "If the result says you're not my mother, then I have to start over. But if it says you are, then everything I've ever known changes." Jennifer understood. She slowly reached for the envelope. Marcus watched as she opened it. She read the first section, then the second. Her expression remained serious. Marcus's breathing became heavier. "What does it say?" he finally asked. Jennifer looked at him. The silence seemed to last forever then. She gently placed the report on the table. "It doesn't establish that I'm your biological mother." Marcus stared at her for a moment. He couldn't move. The answer he had been searching for had arrived, but it wasn't the dramatic confirmation he had imagined. There was no secret revelation, no sudden explanation for every photograph and every unanswered question. There was simply uncertainty. Marcus looked down. "So that's it?" he whispered. Jennifer shook her head. "No, I don't think it is." Marcus looked up. The DNA result answers one question, Jennifer said, but it doesn't explain why your family had these photographs and documents. Marcus looked at the old photograph. That was the moment he realized something. The DNA test hadn't ended the mystery. It had changed the mystery. Instead of asking, "Is Jennifer Hudson my mother?" Marcus was now asking a different question. Why was Jennifer Hudson connected to my childhood at all? That question sent him back to the box. He began examining every document again. This time, he wasn't looking for proof that Jennifer was his mother. He was looking for the truth behind the photograph. He noticed something he had missed before. A tiny set of initials was written in the corner of the photograph. Marcus searched through the other papers and found the same initials on an old letter. Initials belonged to Danielle. Marcus immediately began searching for her. Days turned into weeks. Eventually, he found a possible contact number. He stared at the screen for several minutes before making the call. An elderly woman answered. "Hello." Marcus introduced himself. There was silence on the other end. Then the woman asked, "Are you Elaine's son?" Marcus froze. "Yes." Another silence. Then the woman quietly said, "I wondered when you would find me." Marcus's heart began pounding. "What do you know?" The woman hesitated. "I know why Elaine kept that box." Marcus sat down. "Then please tell me." The woman took a deep breath. "Jennifer Hudson was never the person you were supposed to be searching for." Marcus closed his eyes. For months, he had convinced himself that Jennifer was the missing piece of his identity. Now the woman on the phone was telling him that he had been looking in the wrong direction. But then why was her name there? Marcus asked. "Because she was connected to the people involved," the woman explained. "There was a period when several families were trying to protect someone's privacy. Jennifer's name became part of that story because of people she knew and because of a photograph taken during that time." Marcus listened carefully. "What about the child in the photograph?" The woman paused. "That child wasn't who you thought it was." Marcus felt the room spin around him for the first time. He understood how easily the person could build an entire story from incomplete information. The photograph was real, the letter was real, Jennifer's name was real, but the conclusion Marcus had drawn from them was wrong. Still, one mystery remained. If Jennifer wasn't his mother, then who was? The woman on the phone gave him a name. It was the name Marcus had never seen in any of Elaine's papers, a woman named Sarah. According to the woman, Sarah had been connected to Marcus's early childhood. She had known Elaine and had been involved in the complicated circumstances surrounding his birth, but she had disappeared from their lives before Marcus was old enough to remember her. Marcus immediately began searching for Sarah. And eventually, after weeks of searching, he found a. Their first conversation was emotional. Sarah confirmed that Elaine had never told Marcus the full story because she believed she was protecting him. There had been difficult circumstances surrounding his childhood. There had been people who wanted privacy. There had been decisions made by adults who believed they were doing what was best. And somewhere along the way, Jennifer's name had become attached to a story that Marcus misunderstood. Old photograph wasn't evidence of secret motherhood. It was evidence of a complicated chapter in several people's lives. Marcus finally understood why Elaine had kept everything hidden. She hadn't been trying to erase his past, she had been trying to protect him from it. But protection had created another problem. By keeping the truth hidden for so long, Elaine had left Marcus with nothing but fragments. And fragments can become dangerous when a person is desperate for answers. Marcus eventually returned to Jennifer one more time. This time, he wasn't carrying an accusation. He wasn't carrying a theory, he was carrying the truth. He had finally uncovered. Jennifer opened the door and recognized him. "You found your answer?" she asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "I found part of it." He showed her the photograph again. "I was wrong about what this meant." Jennifer looked at him. "But you were right about one thing," she said. "What?" "You had every right to ask questions." Marcus nodded. For the first time since finding the box, he felt at peace. He had arrived at Jennifer's door believing he was about to discover the biggest secret of his life. Instead, he discovered something far more complicated. He discovered that family isn't always defined by the person whose name appears on a document. Sometimes, family is the person who raises you. Sometimes, it is the person whose absence shapes you. And sometimes, the people who enter your story for only a moment can leave behind questions that take decades to answer. Marcus never forgot that evening. He never forgot the photograph. And he never forgot the look on Jennifer's face when he first told her, "I think you're my mother." But eventually, he stopped being embarrassed by the mistake, because the search had given him something he had needed for years. Not fame, not a celebrity connection, not a sensational headline. Closure. End. As Marcus placed the old photograph back inside the box, he finally understood something Elaine had tried to tell him years earlier. The past matters, but it doesn't have to decide your future. Sometimes you have to open the old boxes, read the forgotten letters, ask uncomfortable questions, and walk directly toward the truth, even when you're afraid of what you'll find, because the truth may not be the story. You wanted it may not even be the story you expected, but once you finally know it, you can stop wondering. And sometimes, stopping the wondering is the beginning of finally living. For several days after their first conversation, Jennifer couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. The young man had arrived at her door believing she was his mother. But even after the DNA results failed to confirm his claim, something about his story stayed with her. It wasn't the photograph alone. It wasn't the mysterious letter or the unanswered questions surrounding his childhood. It was the way Marcus had looked at her when he realized his theory might have been wrong. There had been disappointment in his eyes. But there was something deeper too, a loneliness that Jennifer couldn't simply forget. She kept asking herself the same question. What happens to a young man who spends his entire life searching for a family, only to discover that the answer he wanted doesn't exist? One evening, Jennifer found herself looking at the old photograph again. She remembered Marcus standing at her door, holding it with trembling hands. She remembered him saying that he hadn't come for money or fame. He had only wanted someone to listen, and that thought stayed with her. Meanwhile, Marcus had returned to his ordinary life, but everything felt different. He had finally uncovered pieces of his past, yet he still felt strangely empty. The woman who had raised him was gone. The family mystery had been more complicated than he imagined, and the person he had hoped might be his mother wasn't. He tried to move forward, but every time his phone remained silent, he wondered whether he had lost something he had never truly possessed. Then, one afternoon, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Marcus almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Hello. There was a pause on the other end. Then he heard a familiar voice. Marcus, it's Jennifer. He immediately sat upright. Jennifer told him she had been thinking about their conversations and wanted to see him again. Marcus agreed, but as he drove toward her home, he couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was about to happen. When Marcus arrived, Jennifer welcomed him inside. This time, there was no photograph lying between them and no DNA report waiting to be opened. They simply sat together and talked. Jennifer asked about his life, his plans, his childhood, and what he wanted to do now that he had finally uncovered the truth. Marcus admitted that he didn't really know. For years, he had been searching for where he belonged. Now that the search was over, he wasn't sure what came next. Jennifer listened carefully. Then she asked him something that caught him completely off guard. If you could have one thing right now, what would it be? Marcus thought for several seconds. He could have asked for money. He could have asked for answers. He could have asked Jennifer to publicly acknowledge him. Instead, he quietly said, a family that doesn't disappear. The room went silent. Jennifer looked at him, and something inside her shifted. She realized Marcus wasn't really searching for a famous mother. He was searching for a place where he felt wanted. She couldn't erase his past, and she couldn't change the result of the DNA test. But perhaps there was another way to help. Over the following weeks, Jennifer continued checking on Marcus. At first, the conversations were occasional. Then they became more frequent. She introduced him to people she trusted and encouraged him to pursue his goals. Slowly, Marcus began to feel that someone genuinely cared about what happened to him. But then Jennifer began considering something she hadn't expected to consider at all. What if she could give Marcus the family connection he had been searching for, not as his biological mother, but as someone who chose to have him in her life? The idea frightened her because adoption was not a simple gesture. It wasn't something that could be done because of one emotional conversation. Jennifer understood that completely. She knew Marcus was an adult and had his own life, his own history, and his own choices. So instead of making a sudden promise, she began researching what a legal adult adoption would actually mean. She spoke privately with people she trusted and considered the emotional consequences carefully. She didn't want Marcus to feel as though she was replacing the mother he had lost. She didn't want him to believe she was trying to rewrite his history. She simply wanted him to know that family could sometimes be chosen as well as inherited. Then came the conversation that Marcus would never forget. Jennifer sat across from him and said, I can't change what happened before you came into my life. Marcus listened silently. And I can't pretend that the DNA results said something it didn't. She paused. But I also don't want you to think that because the test didn't make us family biologically, that means you have to walk away. Marcus looked at her, confused. Jennifer continued. Sometimes people become family because they choose each other. Marcus didn't know what to say. Then Jennifer finally revealed what she had been thinking about. Have you ever considered the possibility of being legally adopted as an adult? Marcus stared at her. For several seconds, he couldn't even process the question. You mean by you? Jennifer nodded. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. But before he could answer, Jennifer made something very clear. This isn't about the photograph. It isn't about the story you came here believing. And it isn't about proving anything to anyone. If we ever do this, it would be because we both choose it. Marcus looked down at the floor, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't explain. He had arrived at Jennifer's door months earlier hoping to hear one sentence. Yes, I'm your mother. Instead, he had heard something completely different. You don't have to leave. And somehow, those words meant even more. But just when Marcus thought the mystery was finally over, another unexpected discovery threatened to change everything. While preparing the remaining adoption paperwork, Jennifer came across a detail in Marcus's old records that neither of them had noticed before. missing section in his original childhood file. There was a reference to a sealed document that had never been included in the records Marcus found after Elaine's death. Jennifer looked at the date, then looked at Marcus. The date was connected to the same period as the photograph. Marcus's face went pale. "What does that mean?" he whispered. Jennifer didn't answer immediately. She simply stared at the document. After everything they had already discovered, there was now one final question hanging between them. If the old records had been incomplete all along, what else had been hidden from Marcus? And suddenly, the decision to become a family was no longer just about healing the past. It might lead them directly back into the mystery they thought they had finally solved. Today, Marcus lives a quiet life in Mexico, far away from the mystery that once consumed him. He has built a new routine and is slowly creating a future on his own terms. But he still keeps the old childhood photograph that started everything. For him, it is no longer proof of a secret, it is a reminder of the questions that changed his life. Jennifer remains an important person in his story, even though the DNA test changed what he once believed. Their unexpected connection taught both of them that family can sometimes be chosen rather than inherited. Marcus says he no longer spends every night searching for answers about the past. Instead, he is focused on the life he is building in Mexico and the future that still lies ahead in the end. Marcus's journey was never really about proving that Jennifer Hudson was his mother. It was about a young man searching for answers, belonging, and a place where he could finally feel accepted. The old photograph, the mysterious letters, and the unexpected meeting at Jennifer's door opened a chapter of his life he never expected to revisit. And although the truth wasn't the dramatic revelation he had imagined, it gave him something just as valuable: the courage to stop running from his past and start building his own future. Today, Marcus lives in Mexico, far from the mystery that once consumed him, but he still keeps that old photograph as a reminder of the journey that changed his life. And perhaps the most powerful lesson is that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes, it's defined by the people who choose to stand beside you when everything else falls apart. But what do you think? If you were in Jennifer's position, would you consider adopting Marcus even after discovering he wasn't your biological son? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story kept you curious until the very end, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because you never know what unbelievable story might come next.